Hello viewers, today we're going to do a brief comparison between old generation cylinder box of BMW, petrol engines especially. By old generation I don't mean M10, M20 or M30, I'm meaning the M50 generation. So we have 4-cylinder box here as you can see, and I'm going to go from left to right. So this is from M50. This is for M52 single Vanos, this is M52 double Vanos, and this is M54, once again double Vanos. Pretty much, as you can see, if someone came and watched this cylinder box, he's going to say that they are pretty much the same. In this video, we're going to do weight comparison, of course. I have cylinder heads for them on a single Vanos, on M52 double Vanos and M54. I just don't have a cylinder head from M50 without a Vanos. I'm not planning to buy. I really like the Vanos system, so I'm planning to use it. Doesn't matter what I'm going to do to the engine in the several months. About the number of the cylinder box, on all of them is on the same place, right there. As we can see on the single Vanos, double Vanos, and on the M54. On all of them is on the same place. The main difference between the M50, M52 single Vanos and the newer generation double Vanos engines, and the thing that you are not going to be able to run cylinder head from these engines on these engines, is this right here. So this is the main difference between the older generation M50 engines and newer generation. This coolant pad added in the cylinder box, which goes directly to the cylinder head. Let me show you. So this is the place where the water pump should be installed, and this is the pad. Let me show you. And this is the path where it goes through. So from here the water pump feeds up the cylinder head, and if we look up the M52 single Vanos, let's say, we're going to see that from here we are feeding directly the cylinder box, and especially this is contributing of the cooling of the cylinders. So this is the main difference, and as we can see on M50 is pretty much the same. Just on A50 the difference is that the pads here are a little bit wider than the M52 single Vanos. So hopefully you guys are going to be able to see it, but let me try to zoom in. So this is the pad inside, and if we look in the M50, as you can see how much wider it is, probably because the cast iron is cooling much more harder than the aluminum cylinder box. So as we can see, this M50 has this chain guide for the oil pump chain, which not all of the M50s has this, but in this case this has it. Yeah, if you want you can add it. You're just going to need to drill a hole, make your own pin and attach this guide here. It's not big of a deal, you're just going to need to drill it somewhere here. As you can see, the difference on M52s, on double Vanos engines, we have this window here, as on the M54. On the older generations we don't have it. And the biggest thing that most of the people are going to ask themselves, how to see if my engine has nickel seal coating on the cylinders or it has sleeves. So how to know this? I have taken sandpaper and I have cleaned up a little bit the cylinder box, and let me try to show you. As we can see here, once again this is M52 single Vanos, which should have nickel seal coating on the cylinder. And if we take closer look here, as we can see, we don't have any edge. Not edge, we don't have any different color, let's say. But if we go through on the double Vanos engine, M52 once again, as we can see here, it's pretty obvious that this engine has a sleeve. I mean by this dark color here. And if we go through on the M54, we're going to see the same. I didn't clean it here actually, but it's pretty obvious, I guess. This is how to know if you have a sleeve on your engine or just a nickel seal, AU seal, or how you wanna call it, coating or on your cylinder, by looking the edge of the cylinder. It's pretty obvious how to see it. Once again, you're just going to take a closer look and you're going to be able to see the sleeve itself attached in that cylinder block. And as we can see here, we don't have none on the M52 single Vanos. All of the M54s has sleeve. It's really rarely to find M52 single Vanos with the sleeves, but there are some. I believe they were from March 96. From there on they were with sleeves. Not 100% sure, but some people are saying that this is right. But actually, I have seen engines newer than this with nickel seal coating once again. And even the newer engine, which is M52 double Vanos, there are some engines like this with nickel seal. If you're searching for an engine with sleeved cylinders, it's always a better idea to check, do you really have a sleeve here or not? This is just my tip, guys. So just a closer look on the side of the engines. As we can see, we have here these tabs for the coolant. Let's say on the older engines, probably many of you guys know, if you put some, let's say, water in the engine and it freezes up, these tabs are here for a reason. They're going to snap. It's going to prevent the cylinder block to crack. So this is a safety measurement. That's why we have it here. And on the newer generation, we don't have this type of plugs, safety plugs for water and for some freezing temperatures. So this is one of the biggest difference here. It's much more cleaner. As we can see on the aluminum ones, we have some rips. Yeah, this is the single Vanos, but on the newer one, double Vanos and the M54, we have much more rips here for straightening the structure. Yeah, the bleeding of the coolant right here on the double Vanos engines is right here on cylinder number 2, and on the single Vanos it's on cylinder number 5 as on the M50. As for the oil filter housing, as we can see, the openings are pretty much the same on all the generations. Single Vanos, double Vanos and M54. All of them are interchangeable. You can use any of the oil filter housings on any of the engine. You're just going to need to swap it. The other thing which is different on the older generation, M50 and M52 single Vanos, we don't have a hole there for the crankshaft sensor, but some of them have it. Really rarely, but some of the M52 single Vanos have a ready hole for a crankshaft sensor there. It's kind of rarely to see a cylinder block with this type of hole, but I believe some people are saying if you have a hole there for the crankshaft sensor, probably you're going to have a sleeve on your M52 single Vanos engine. Cannot say for sure, but some people are saying that probably is possible. It should be looking something like that, like on the double Vanos engines. As we can see, this is the M52 double Vanos and this is the M54. Okay, so underneath, let's start with the M50. So the biggest difference underneath is the design of the oil nozzles. As we can see right there, this is the oil nozzle. And if we go through the other engines, this is how they have changed the design. And pretty much on all of them is looking like that. Only on the M50 B25 is looking like that. But I believe on the M50 B20 we didn't have oil nozzles. I am not 100% sure, I don't remember, but I believe it was something like that. And you needed to make your own holes and make your own oil nozzles if you decide to stroke the engine. But yeah, this is the main design. The main bearing caps are looking pretty much identical on all of the engines. Let's talk about the oil pumps. As we know, the M52 single Vanos has weaker oil pump than the M52 double Vanos and M54, which has much more superior oil pump with much more capacity and density and everything else. So, how to install oil pump from a double Vanos engine to a single Vanos cylinder block. The thing that you're going to need to do, as we can see here, this part where the oil pump is going to be attached should be machined to look like this, as we can see here. I don't remember how many millimeters they were, but this should be machined to start looking like that. It's pretty identical. We have done it on a single Vanos engine. We have installed a double Vanos oil pump. It is possible and it is running for now. You're just going to need to machine this piece here, so to make it fit. Okay, and you're going to need to machine this part of it too. I forget about this. So here, as we can see, it is flat with the end of the cylinder block, and here, as we can see, it's pretty much the same level as here. So you're going to need to machine this upper part too, like here, because here it is flat, and here on the M54 is pretty much the same. So the oil pumps on the double Vanos engines is interchangeable, but you cannot use it on a single Vanos except you decide to machine your cylinder block and make it fit. It's some good gain, especially if you decide to run a turbo, because then you're going to need much more oil density running through the engine. So it's a really good feature if you decide to do it. So there we have a plug for the coolant to be drained, as we can see on all the engines except the M50, of course, because this is the hardcore version. It doesn't have some unnecessary things. And the working of the flywheel is on the same place of all the 6-cylinder engines. As we can see, this is the plug. So on all of them is on the same place. Okay, so we're going to start with the M52 single Vanos cylinder block. Cylinder. Do you guys think what's the result? $25.7 kilos. Now we're going to continue with the double Vanos cylinder block, which is the newer generation of this. Okay, this is the M52 double Vanos cylinder block. Let's see how much it is. So 28.1. All the cylinder blocks are equipped the same way. By that I mean all of them has the main bearing caps underneath, as we can see. So yeah, probably a few bolts or nuts can be different. As you can see, here we have 3 pins, and on this one here we don't have any, and still this is much heavier. But once again, it's equipped with the main bearing caps, and yeah, pretty interesting that this is so much heavier without the pins. Yeah, the pins probably going to weigh around 100 grams. It's not going to be something crazy, but rather than that, everything else is the same. So let's continue with the M54 cylinder block. Okay, the M54. Право с 300 грама. То си мали пин отпред. Един. Okay, it looks like this is the heaviest one. 28.4, and here on the front we have one pin for the guides, which I don't think is going to contribute a lot about the weight. So it turns out from the aluminum blocks, all 3 of them, the M54 is the heaviest, and as we saw, 28.4. So yeah, from the lightest one we have roughly 3 kilos of difference. So this is the M50 cylinder block. This is the unicorn of BMW cylinder blocks, because it's really hard to find it these days. I managed to find one, but for my luck, it turns out that the previous owners decided to do something not really smart and erase the number of the cylinder block. So it's going to be kind of hard to register this cylinder block, because in our country you're going to need to have papers if you change your cylinder block. So it kind of sucks, but this is what it is. So let's see how heavy is this. Close enough. So let me show you the result. the good old M50 B25, 49 kilos, so roughly 21 kilo heavier than the M54, which is the heaviest of all the aluminum ones. So yeah, this is really heavy, but the biggest plus is that it's from cast iron. But in my case, I'm probably going to use the M54. You're going to ask me now which is the best, and I'm going to say it to you guys, depends what is your goals. If you are planning to run an atmospheric engine, probably the M52 single Vanos with the nickel seal coating is going to be fine with you. The only downside is that you cannot run aftermarket piston rings. If you have some issues with oil burning and stuff like this, you're going to need to buy OEM oil rings, because if you buy aftermarket ones, be sure that you're going to damage your engine pretty fast and you're going to have a lot of lining on the nickel seal, because the piston rings are different. Some of them are made only for nickel seal, some of them are made only for sleeves, like on the newer generations. So just take in mind, if you have an oil burning issue, you're probably going to need the original piston rings, which are kind of expensive. This is the only downside. Probably other than that, I guess you are not going to have any issues by wearing of the cylinders if you are running atmospheric engine. Of course, if you go the next step, forced induction, we are going to step up with a sleeved engine. I am planning to run the M54 engine because I want to bore out the cylinder. By bore out, I mean from 84 to 84.5. And if you want to go crazy, of course the M50 B25 is the best thing you can buy. It's really rigid and it's going to hold a lot of pressure. But I'm not planning to go with some crazy 1000 horsepower. I'm planning to go something around 500, which the M54 is going to handle without any issues. That's why I'm planning to go with the M54, because it's lighter and it is cooling itself much more faster than the M50, and especially because of the oil pump, because it comes with the right oil pump with the bigger capacity and density. So for sure there are some benefits running the M54 than the M50. The biggest one, the weight and the oil pump. Okay, so cylinder heads. M52 single Vanos, M52 double Vanos, and M54. Once again, I don't have a M50 without Vanos cylinder head. So pretty much, as you can see it from the top, they are pretty much the same. And actually, the valves, the diameter of the valves is all the same between all of the cylinder heads. I have measured them, they are all the same. There is no difference in the diameter of the valves. Doesn't matter, it is from 2.8 or these two are 2.8 single Vanos and double Vanos, and this is M54 3-liter engine. But even with M54 2.5 engine, still the valves are the same diameter. There is no difference. I have measured them. I had the M54 B25 cylinder head in the shop and I have measured the valves. They are the same. There is no difference at all. And the main difference is this here, this curve here. As you can see, we don't have it here. And this is the main reason why we cannot install single Vanos unit on a double Vanos cylinder head. Still, it's not impossible, but if you want to be plug and play, you're not going to be able to do it. In my next videos, I'm going to do this, but once again, it is possible to install a single Vanos unit on a double Vanos cylinder head, which I'm going to do because I'm planning to run an M54 engine with a single Vanos. That's why I'm going to do it, because I don't want to run the double Vanos system. Pretty much the biggest plus of the double Vanos system is not the exhaust camshaft. From the exhaust camshaft and the Vanos on the exhaust camshaft, mainly you're going to gain some emission pluses, but the biggest gain of the double Vanos is that it's much more faster than the single Vanos. And some of the reasons is the oil pump itself, because it is much more stronger, but the main reason is the feed which goes to the Vanos, which is much bigger. So this is the main reason. The Vanos is much more faster. It's not big of a deal for me, because I have already a camshaft for a single Vanos, so I am planning to use them with a single Vanos units, and I believe the single Vanos is a little bit more trouble free than the double Vanos system. That's why I'm planning to use it like that. But other than that, on the top, as we can see, pretty much everything is the same. Let me show you something. So this is a tensioner for the Vanos system, and it should be installed here. And as we can see on all the cylinder heads, it is the same. This came with the double Vanos cylinder head, but doesn't matter. As we can see, we can install it on the single Vanos cylinder head. It's all the same. The tensioner here for the chain is pretty much the same. Yeah, you can run a S54 tensioner, chain tensioner, which is much more stronger than the OEM M52 tensioner and M54. But this doesn't matter. Just wanted to say that everything is the same. The difference on the side, as you can see here, let's start with here. We don't have this poke here, which doesn't look very good. This has seen better days, but doesn't matter. We have some poke here for, I believe this was for the air valves, for heating up the lambda sensors a little bit faster. And as we can see, we have a poke here, which is the best solution actually. On the newer generation M52 and M52 double Vanos and M54, we have this air inlets, which we don't have on the M52 single Vanos, as we can see here. Let me take a wide. As we can see here, we don't have this air inlets there. So the main air inlets are totally different than the newer generations. As we can see, the M52 and the M54 is pretty much identical. So on the single Vanos, the exhaust outlets are maybe a little bit bigger, if I'm not mistaken, because if we take a closer look, this is kind of a more square one. Okay, I have measured them. On the single Vanos, the width is 40 and the height is 26, and on the both M54 and M52 double Vanos, the width is 34 and the height is, once again, this is how much it was. I believe it was once again 26. Okay, 25. So yeah, it's a little bit smaller than the single Vanos. So, but I guess the design is a little bit different, and as we can see, these holes here, this is once again for the air inlet system for heating up the lambda sensors, which I'm probably going to weld up and not going to use. The dimensions of the single Vanos and the double Vanos on the intake manifold is kind of different, but I don't see the point of measuring these outlets, because it really depends. It really depends of the design inside of the port. It's not so straightforward just measuring the dimensions of the inlet or the outlets. It really depends on the design inside. It's not so easy just to do a few measurements and to make your estimate which is better. It's not so simple actually. As you can see, here is where the coolant temperature sensor is located on the newer engines. Is behind here. As we can see, there is actually the sensor is still installed on the M54. Okay, so underneath, and once again, the reason that why you are not going to be able to run single Vanos cylinder head on a double Vanos cylinder block is once again this, because you are not going to have it here. So the main difference is that the main coolant path is going through the cylinder head and after that to the cylinder block. And as we can see, we have this feed here, which leads the coolant to other parts of the engine, and we don't have it on the single Vanos. We just have the camshaft sensor here, as on the other engines, on the same place. They didn't change the place of it. Some difference here on the double Vanos engine. We have some hole here, which we don't have on the M54. As we can see, we don't have it here. This here is for not draining the oil when the engine is turned off. If this fails, you're going to drain your oil every time you turn off the engine in the oil pan, and you're going to need to fit every time you start up the engine the whole cylinder head with oil. By that I mean the camshaft ledges. So we have the same valve on all of the cylinder heads. So if this fails, you're going to have some noises when you are starting up your car every time, most likely, if you leave it for a little bit longer period of time. I don't see any difference in the design of the ignition chamber. Here we have the same edge like this one. I don't see what else I can show you. This is not some in detailed video because I don't have the tools to make some comparison between about the airflow on all of the ports to see which is better between the intake and the exhaust. Probably it's going to be really interesting, but I don't have the equipment for doing this, and actually I don't know anyone that have it in my country. But it's going to be really interesting to see the airflow between all of the cylinder heads. Okay, now we're going to continue with the measurement of the cylinder heads. I'm going to start with M52 double Vanos cylinder head. Once again, the equipment is the same without camshafts and the camshaft ledges. Okay, so once again, M52 double Vanos, and let me show you the result. 21.3 kilos. Now I'm going to put the M54 cylinder head. Okay, 19.9. And now about the cylinder head of a single Vanos M52 is going to be a little bit more tricky because actually I'm missing right now 6 valves and 7 springs. So we're going to measure them alone, and we're going to add that weight to the weight of the whole cylinder head, so to see how heavy is the cylinder head itself. So let's see how much it's going to weigh. Okay, this is the single Vanos M52. 19.5. But once again, we are missing 8 valves right now and 8 springs. So I'm going to see how much weighs single valve and single spring, and we're going to add that weight to the whole weight of this cylinder head. So this is the valves, as we can see. Yeah, the intake one has bigger diameter actually, and as usual it's looking a little bit bad. It has some debris on it, but as we can see the diameter is bigger. I don't believe, if I remember right, the diameter of the intake valve was 33 millimeters and the exhaust one was 30.5 millimeters. And the interesting part is that the intake valve, which is with the bigger diameter, is more lightweighted than the exhaust one, which is 30.5 millimeters. And most likely this is because of the design of them. So let me show you. So as we can see on the intake valve, we are missing some material like on the exhaust one. So hopefully you guys are going to see it. It's hard to show you, but I'm talking about this curve here, here and here. Probably this is the reason why we have such small difference. And here let's measure the spring. So roughly 40 grams. So let me do my math and tell you how much is the total weight of the M52 single Vanos cylinder head. If my math is right, this should be 20.2 kilos with all the valves, all the springs and everything included. Okay guys, pretty much this is going to be the comparison, nothing crazy. It was interesting for me to see the weight difference actually. Hopefully there was some information for you guys. I cannot do some in-depth comparison about checking how rigid is every block. I don't have that equipment, sorry about this, but I just want to show you the difference by looks of it. Hopefully it was interesting for you as it was for me. So thank you for watching and see you in the next video.